Hello, and welcome to the Savvy Safety Sisters Partner and Prevention Podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Pasquarello with Global Secure Resources. And one of the powerful ways that we can reduce risk and prevent harm is by sharing real stories from around the world that educate and inspire, and sometimes can even save lives. Now, our mission is to turn awareness into action, helping you and your family stay informed, prepared, and safer every day. Now, we aim to empower our audience with education and advocacy through expert insights and relevant personal stories. And with that, I want to mention that this is Rare Disease Month, and we're highlighting nearly 300 million people worldwide that are living with a rare disease. Now, many of you know that I've covered lots of stories about CADASIL, and I've interviewed patients, families, and many people in the medical field. Now, today, I want to discuss another side of family health. Now, we're going to shine a light on preparing for the unexpected. This includes health changes, disabilities, and decisions that everyone should start to think about today. Now, today's guest is Dr. Erin Kyle, a doctor of nursing practice and a board-certified nurse executive who brings a powerful blend of clinical excellence, surgical nursing expertise, and healthcare leadership experience. Now, she's a national leader in evidence-based perioperative practices and a passionate advocate for patient-centered care. Now, as the editor-in-chief of the Guidelines for Perioperative Practice, Dr. Kyle oversees the development of clinically actionable standards used by surgical teams across the nation. Now, her work improves safety, communication, and outcomes for patients and their families, helping people navigate serious illnesses with clarity and preparedness and compassionate support, including when facing uncertain or progressive conditions, including neurological diseases such as CADASIL. Now, Dr. Kyle brings a clear, insightful voice about decision-making, care planning, and the emotional realities of living with a chronic or life-limiting illness. Now, her work champions the ideas that preparedness is not about pessimism, but it's about giving people the knowledge and the tools and confidence that they need to live fully and a meaningful at every stage of health. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. For me, Rare Disease Month is always a moment of reflection. I come from a family affected by CADASIL, which is a rare hereditary condition that impacts small vessels in the brain. And a few years ago, I personally began experiencing neurological symptoms that at that time were completely unexplained. Because of my family history, I had every reason to believe that these symptoms could signal a narrow window to get my own plans in order. That period of uncertainty changed me. I
Wow,
had
thank
spent
you.
years as a nurse talking with families during the hardest moments of their lives, but suddenly I found myself thinking about my own future in a very real way. It shifted how I think about planning, about independence, about dignity, and about what it means to prepare for the things you hope never happen. So this conversation is deeply personal to me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about it.
Wow, and thank you so much for sharing that side of this conversation today because it's so important, and it just is opening so many different doors for so many other people, this type of conversation. Now, I'd like to go back a little bit and ask about your personal experience as a nurse, your nursing background, and also, I think you touched upon it a little bit, but about how you became where you are today in your career.
Yeah, sure. I became a nurse 20 plus years ago, and I chose the profession because I really just wanted to help people. My father had become quite ill when I was very young, and I became connected with the healthcare community through that experience. And I witnessed nurses being the cornerstone of coordination of care for him and for others in the hospital setting. So I knew that I wanted to do something that meaningful with my life, and that's why I became a nurse. The progression into perioperative nursing was something that was not really expected for me, but it seemed very natural. And over the course of my career, I decided that I wanted to become more in touch with evidence-based practice, which is why I continued my education and ultimately landed my dream job doing just that, and that is translating evidence into practice. And I've spent the last, oh goodness, let's see, it's 2026, almost 10 years with AORN in that realm, and it's been a real blessing.
Wow, what an amazing background that you have. Now, I want to jump right in to the big question. It has to do with decision making and advocacy. What happens when a patient can't speak for themselves and there's no clear plan in place?
It's a heartbreaking thing when this happens. When a patient can't speak for themselves and there's no plan, things become complicated very quickly. Not because people don't care, but because everyone is suddenly trying to interpret wishes that were never clearly stated. In healthcare, if there's no documentation of their wishes, the default is to always pursue the most aggressive treatment options available. That might include life support, invasive procedures, or interventions the patient never would have chosen for themselves. From the family's perspective, it becomes an emotional storm. People are scared. They're trying to do the right thing under immense pressure, and sometimes multiple family members have different ideas about what the right thing actually is. This is where I've seen relationships strain, siblings disagree, and long-standing tension surface, all while the patient is unable to participate. And as nurses and clinicians, we try to guide families with compassion, but without a clear plan, we're all forced into reactive decision making. It's painful for everyone involved. A plan just isn't a document, it's a gift that you leave for the people who love you so they never have to wonder.
Wow, and that is the truth. And it really comes back to a story that's very close to my heart, and it's about Bailey, which is a student, a young student that was a sophomore down at the University of Miami. And while she was there, she was only 19 years old, and she was in a catastrophic accident. And unfortunately, she didn't have the necessary medical legal forms in place, her healthcare proxy, the release forms, her power of attorney, all those were not in place. And her mom wrote an amazing book called Bailey, A True Story. And this just brings it home how we don't know who or when or what the circumstances are, but we're all going to need wishes made clear to our loved ones, just like you said, so that we don't have any family fights or especially during this really high stressed event in our lives. That's pretty important to have done, and I'm sure you've been in the room for a lot of those conversations. So let's start with another question. What's something that the public doesn't realize about how quickly someone's health or independence can change?
Most people underestimate the speed at which independence can disappear. There is an assumption that decline comes with a warning sign, that you'll see it coming and have time to adjust. But often, independence is lost in a moment. One episode of sudden confusion can change the entire trajectory of someone's cognitive function. One fall can alter mobility permanently. One stroke can affect speech, swallowing, memory, and independence. And sometimes the change isn't dramatic, it's subtle. A family member notices someone repeating themselves more often, or struggling to manage medications, or getting lost on the way home. These early signs can be easy to explain away or ignore, but they often signal bigger shifts that families aren't emotionally prepared for. What I want people to understand is that life doesn't always give you the courtesy of time. A healthy person, even the rock of the family, can become vulnerable very quickly. And when that happens, having a plan, even a simple one, turns a frightening crisis into something much more manageable.
That is so true. I'm always talking about how important it is to have a plan in place and maybe not need it, but if you need a plan, not having one really can wreak havoc on everything. So always having a plan in place is so critical. Now, in your experience, who is the most underprepared? Is it our young adults? Is it families? Is it our elderly individuals? Who and why?
You know, every age group has its own form of unpreparedness. Young adults feel absolutely invincible. They're building careers, raising families, taking care of others, and they assume that their health will cooperate. They never think that they'll need a plan. They think planning is for future me or not the version of themselves who's alive today.
Yeah.
And families with children often focus all of their planning around the kids. This is a phase of life where everyone is focused on caring for and providing for their families. They might not consider that if something happened to them, decisions about their own care would fall to people who might not even know what they want. And older adults often assume that their children just know, but so many families haven't actually had those conversations. They're guessing, and guessing in a crisis is really devastating. The common thread is a belief that there will be time later, time to talk, time to decide, time to plan. And the truth is, we never know how much time we actually have. Planning isn't age dependent, it's really life dependent.
Yeah, and I think with global secure resources, that's one of the things that I always focus on are those what if questions, like running through the strategies, tools, and techniques to make sure that your family has those plans in place. What if scenarios are so good to, go through. But what does a patient advocacy look like when wishes aren't clear and aren't documented well? What does that look like?
Yeah, documented. That's a really important piece of this. So advocacy becomes much more complex when wishes aren't documented because it shifts from honoring that patient's explicit choices, which are there in front of you, to trying to figure it out in the moment, trying to interpret what someone might have wanted. And as a nurse, you're listening closely to family stories, to patient values, to what they prioritized in life, but it's all still just guesswork. The truth is, no matter how skilled the clinical team is, no amount of compassionate detective work can replace a clear directive and one that's documented. When wishes aren't documented, that advocacy becomes an act of protection and comfort rather than precision. We're doing everything we can to preserve the dignity and minimize suffering, but we don't always have the clarity we need to act with confidence. So that clear documentation doesn't take away for the need for advocacy, it really does strengthen it. It gives every caregiver, every provider, every family member a foundation and a clear roadmap to stand on. When the patient's voice is written down, advocacy becomes more about honoring their identity, not interfering with their preferences.
Yeah, and what a comfort, like you said, that word is so powerful in everything that you just said. That truly can bring comfort to the family, knowing exactly what to do next. I love that. Now, many people think palliative care means the end. From a nursing standpoint, what does it actually mean?
I love that you bridged from advocacy and comfort into palliative care. And this is a topic that I love to talk about because it's so misunderstood and it can be so valuable, especially for people with a newly diagnosed disease, rare disease like CADASIL, where there are so many questions and not as many answers. So palliative care is one of the most misunderstood areas in healthcare. And I wish more people really knew how supportive and empowering it truly can be. Many people think that palliative care is the same as hospice, but let me be clear, does not mean that a person is at the end of their life. And it also does not mean that you're opting out of curative treatments. You can have both. You're participating in life fully, and you're also have the option of curative treatments at the same time as you're making plans. So that's what makes it so valuable, and also what makes it distinct from hospice. It definitely doesn't mean that you're giving up. What it means is that you're being supported deeply and holistically during any stage of a serious illness, even from diagnosis. So, from a nursing perspective, palliative care is about improving quality of life, managing symptoms, and supporting emotional well-being and helping families, not just the patient, but the family navigate uncertainty. It's an added layer of support, not a last resort. It focuses on things that matter to patients, such as pain control, comfort, clarity, dignity, and the ability to participate in decisions about their care and live a full life. People living with chronic, progressive, or rare diseases can benefit from palliative care early, right at diagnosis. In fact, the earlier it's introduced, the more helpful it can be because this is when the patient has the most agency, and that is powerful. Palliative care teams are experts in communication, symptom management, and aligning care with values. It's really about helping people live as fully as possible for as long as possible.
Wow, that's a lot of empowerment in palliative care. Oh my gosh. I'm so happy that you cleared that up for everybody because a lot of times people are thinking that might come towards the end, but it's not. So, when do you believe that palliative care should be entered with the family conversation? Like probably before anything even happens, but what's your ideas on that? When do you start the conversation?
I believe that palliative care should enter the conversation long before a crisis. Ideally, at the point when a serious or chronic condition is diagnosed, that day is the perfect time to start. The earlier the introduction, the more opportunity there is to build a trusting relationship, address symptoms proactively, and create a roadmap that aligns care with the patient's values and goals. When we only bring up palliative care at the end of life, we're depriving patients and their families of sometimes years of support that they could have received if they had started earlier. Early palliative care manages pain, fatigue, anxiety, depression, all things that affect quality of life, even when the illness is stable. It also gives families time to adjust, ask questions, and understand what to expect. So early integration isn't about forecasting a decline. It's about building resilience. It's about making sure the patient feels heard and supported during their entire journey, not just the toughest moments. People deserve that level of care throughout the trajectory of illness, not just at the finish line.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, does every single hospital have a office that focuses on palliative care, or is this more different types of organizations? I'm just curious.
Resources vary from organization to organization, from state to state, and those organizations that have the most integrated palliative care models, in my opinion, are the best kinds of healthcare systems. But the access is really different in different places. I can share some resources with you that people all over the country can go to find what's available to them in their areas. There's some really powerful search engines and resources that they can use that I can share with you.
Oh, that would be awesome. Now, how have you seen palliative care improve the quality of life for patients and families? Like, do you have any examples or can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, palliative care really just transforms the experience of illness. It really does, not just for patients, but for entire families. I've seen patients who came to the hospital frightened, overwhelmed, and really uncomfortable finally exhale when the palliative team stepped in. Suddenly they had people asking questions like, what matters most to you right now? What do you hope for in the coming weeks? What do you want your life to look like for the coming years, decades? How can we make life feel more manageable for you right now? And how can we support you moving forward? Those are the questions that really put people at ease, especially those in crisis. So the focus becomes living well, not just treating the disease, and definitely not giving up a full life. I've watched people regain control of their pain after months of struggling. I've seen anxiety reduce dramatically simply because someone finally listened to their concerns and explained what to expect in a way that made sense. Families who were once in nonstop crisis mode began to feel more supported and guided and reassured. For some, palliative care gives them the clarity and peace they need to enjoy time with loved ones. For others, it gives them the confidence to pursue treatments that they had been too overwhelmed to even consider. So it's not just medical care, it's communication, emotional support, symptom management, and guidance all working together. It improves quality of life by addressing the whole person and the family, not just the diagnosis.
Wow, it sounds like there's a lot of empathy in that portion of care for individuals. And I could imagine that if an individual had a palliative care team come and speak with them, how encouraged they would feel and how supported that they must feel. And the families, I mean, the same type of reaction. This is just amazing. I just love that we're talking about palliative care. And I can see why you love it so much.
Yes, and I would like to say that palliative care in coordination with the medical model works really well. And I think that it's really a wonderful support to physicians and their teams because physicians have a very laser focus on curative aspects and finding ways to medically manage the disease process. This when they're partnered with the palliative care team and approach, then they're also fully supported because they can delegate that all of those other aspects of care of the whole person into that realm so that they can keep their laser focus on medical management. And I think it's a really beautiful partnership.
That's amazing. Now I have to talk about like planning ahead. Why do you think people avoid conversations about wills, about health directives, and about future care?
What a big question.
Loaded question.
Yes. Well, I would say that avoidance is human nature, especially when the topic touches on vulnerability. Many people think that talking about these things is somehow inviting something bad to happen, as if planning might jinx their health.
Yeah.
Others feel overwhelmed because they don't know where to start or worry the conversation will be sad or uncomfortable. Culturally, we often treat future planning as something reserved for older adults or something you only do when the doctor tells you it's time. But health doesn't follow age rules and crisis doesn't wait until you feel ready. I've also found that people avoid these conversations because they're afraid of burdening their families or causing conflict. Ironically, not talking about it creates far more burden later. People assume they'll handle it when the time comes, but when the time comes, emotions are high, decisions are rushed sometimes, and clarity is desperately needed. The key message is this: planning isn't morbid, it's responsible, it's protective, and it's one of the most loving things you can do for yourself and the people who care about you.
Yeah, isn't that so true? Definitely loving to be able to share your wishes with others and make sure that things are in place and ready to access in a crisis. So, what do you wish that every single patient had in place before a health crisis happened?
This is probably well, after the palliative care questions, I think this is my most favorite question. If I could have a magic wand and every patient would have three things in place. First, an advance directive that clearly outlines their preferences for medical care, not just end of life choices, but the values that guide those choices. Second, a durable power of attorney for healthcare, someone they trust, who understands their wishes and is emotionally equipped to speak on their behalf. And third, I wish everyone had an honest conversation with themselves and their loved ones about what matters most. These three elements work together. A document alone can't capture a person's values unless someone has talked through them. And a decision maker can't advocate confidently if they're guessing. If something as simple as writing down a few sentences, if I can speak for myself, I want to. If I can recover, let's try. If I'm suffering without hope of improvement, I want comfort first. This gives families clarity. It prevents chaos and it prevents conflict. And it ensures the patient's voice remains the center of every decision. So those three things:
Yeah.
advanced directives, a durable power of attorney, and an honest conversation about all of it. Sooner, now.
That's really great points. And what are the most common gaps that you see in people's plans or the lack of plan? Like out of all those things that you just mentioned, is there one that often people are forgetting?
Yes, the documentation. The most common gap is assuming a plan exists when it really doesn't. People often tell me, "Oh, we've talked about it," But what they mean is that they had a brief conversation years ago that didn't cover the details that matter during a real crisis. Another big gap is outdated documents, forms completed 10, 15, 20 years ago that no longer reflect the person's health, values, or living situation. People can change their minds about what their values are over time. And what you thought you wanted 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, might not be the same thing that your today choices would be. I also see a lot of logistical gaps. Documents kept in drawers no one knows about, healthcare proxies who don't know who that they've even been chosen, or family members who have widely different interpretations of what the patient would want or what they said years ago, and also no documentation. And the final gap, and probably the most important, is the lack of specificity. People will say, I don't want to suffer, or do everything you can. But those phrases are different in every person's mind. What, what do you really want? What does quality of life mean to you? What are your non-negotiables? When would comfort become a priority? Without that clarity, even well-intentioned families and clinicians can end up making decisions that don't really match the patient values, even though they think they're getting close as they can with the limited information that they have. So those gaps can really open wide in a crisis.
Wow. Well, that covered so much. And I think our listeners are really going to take a lot of key next step ideas from this podcast today. I mean, I'm writing some of them down. I'm really happy because I took care of all of my directives and I redid them after all of my children are over 18 and in different parts of their life. So I redid everything. It's something we really need to revisit every 10 years and get into the habit of talking with our children and our family members about our care, our wishes, and get it all written down and make sure, like you said, logistically, where is it? Where is it kept? Where can they reach these important documents? You just covered so many great points. I'm just so happy that we had this conversation. And I know we're at the end of our day and our conversation, and we covered so much. But Dr. Kyle, do you have any last words for our listeners today?
Yes, yes, definitely. I assume that if you're listening to this and you've made it to the end of this conversation, that you're highly engaged in this topic and you want what's next. You feel empowered and you have agency now and you want to go out and find the resources and take those next steps. So I would advise you to do that right now or make time for yourself to do that just as soon as possible. I'm going to be sharing some information with Carrie in the show notes about how to access information about palliative care that's available to you in your area. I would also encourage you to start the conversation about advanced directives, living wills, power of attorney. All of those things I'll start those conversations right now. And if you're uncomfortable getting started with the conversation, baby step into it. Maybe just start it gently and uh, and promise yourself that you'll follow through. Seek out all of the information that you need to be as prepared as possible for the unexpected, because the unexpected can happen in a moment, and you never know when that moment will be. And as a person whose family is affected by CADASIL, I can tell you that I today am a different person knowing what I know about this disease and how it affects people. And after having my own personal experience with an unexplained health issue, I can tell you that it is a gift to have the opportunity to make plans in advance. And my plea to you is to take advantage of that gift right now for you and your family.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. It's just fascinating. I can't wait to have another conversation with you. I'll make sure to get all these resources and add them to our podcast notes for our listeners. And I'll also include that great resource from the Bailey's Wish Foundation regarding medical forms, which gives easy access to all the different states' forms, because every state is different with all these forms. So I'll make sure that I add in Bailey's Wish Foundation, their link. But as we close today's conversation, and I think just to reiterate, one of the most powerful message that we can leave is preparing for the unexpected is not about fear. It's about love, it's about protection, about making sure that your voice is heard even when you can't speak for yourself. And here's four key takeaways that I know you covered as well. First, to have the conversation. Talk openly with your loved ones about your wishes and your values and what quality of life means to you. These conversations may feel uncomfortable, but they create clarity for your family. And it's the most important thing to have during a crisis. And next, decisions in writing. It's so important, just like you said, make sure that their documents are there, available, where they're located. Make sure you have your wills, your healthcare proxies, your directives, medical power of attorney to make sure that your choices are respected and that they're legally protected. Next, identify those gaps. Ask yourself, who has access to my documents? Are my plans updated? Does the family know exactly where they are so that they can grab them in a critical moment? And last, make sure that you understand planning is ongoing. Life and health and circumstances change all the time, so make sure that you revisit them regularly. And if I ask you one last question, how often do you think people should revisit? Because I'm just thinking about this. Should it be every 10 years, every 5 years? What's your idea?
Yeah, I was just thinking I would like to talk about this because you said that you're encouraging you said that you have updated yours every
Oh,
10 years, which is fabulous. Most people never do it once. So
yeah.
every 10 years is a great start, but I would say that every 10 years is probably a good target, but I would also add and and every 10 years or every 5 years and anytime something changes.
Yes.
Think about what you learned through your life and think about the person that you are today compared to the person that you were 5 years ago. Is that person similar? Are
Yeah.
you do you still maintain the same values? And I think that if people are very honest with themselves when they ask themselves that question, they'll find that the person that they were 5 years ago is a much different person than they are today. So 5 years might be the right cadence. But if you're someone who looks back and says, I'm the same person as I was 10 years ago, then 10 years probably makes sense for you.
Right.
So anytime something changes, let that be a trigger to do a refresh of all of these documented preferences.
That is so awesome. I'm glad we stopped to have you fill that in because that is exactly on target. And I think as we keep updating and looking and talking, it becomes an easier conversation to have. It's not a one and done where you feel sick to your stomach trying to even discuss these things. It's just a matter of fact. We're going to go over our life plan and get it all in the open so all the family members know it, and it's going to be so much easier and it will provide a peace of mind and help ensure that even during life's most difficult moments, your voice and your values will be heard and it will lead the way. So I love that. And so that is it for today. And we'll be back for another episode to increase public awareness about topics faced by people in their daily lives, whether traveling around the world or around the corner. And be sure to visit globalsecurestudent.com for more information about our community awareness and prevention programs. And don't forget to hit that follow button. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.